When you begin to understand the violence and the manipulation and the threats that survivors of trafficking have experienced, it can almost feel like, how could something this horrible happen? How could individuals in our society be capable of doing this?
Human trafficking is basically working to cause a person to engage in either labor or services or commercial sex acts without the consent of that person.
For too long, we have let human trafficking be in the shadows. We have ignored this crime, and it's happening in all zip codes with the click of a smartphone.
There's a major study that indicates that over 90% of the survivors of sex trafficking have serious physical injuries or serious psychological damage, such as post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety or clinical depression. And there are many other things that happen too, but the consequences are much graver than most people understand with regard to sex trafficking.
So much of your humanity is stripped away from you, and so much of your agency is taken to the point that small decisions aren't really your decisions anymore. You are somebody else's property, your whole self, everything about you. The psychological abuse, the physical abuse, the spiritual abuse, the relational abuse is so deep. It takes years and years and years to unravel that.
Trafficker often exploits a person's vulnerabilities, and we all have vulnerabilities. It might be that we want a sense of love and belonging. It might be that we need a place to stay tonight, and a trafficker exploits that and begins trafficking a person and selling them and controlling almost every aspect of their life. Oftentimes they use force, which is oftentimes beating and physical harm. They use fraud. They might say, I love you. They might promise millions of dollars. They might promise a better life. And they often use coercion, and that looks like threats to their family, threats to turn them in so that they get arrested, all different types of threats.
For me, it became about survival and just trying to numb out to it, because it was, when I stand outside it, it's so horrific. I equate it to like an outer body experience, because it's like I was participating but not really. And so it was kind of like shock, like, is this really happening? Am I really living this, or is this just a crazy nightmare?
I saw a newspaper article about Senator McGill having hearings on human trafficking in Nebraska, and my initial response is, that doesn't happen in Nebraska.
I think that the misperception for most people throughout the United States is that sex trafficking does not happen in my backyard, but it does.
It's not just young women, it's not just foreigners brought into our country. This is happening to our schoolgirls, our schoolboys. Trafficking is such an ugly thing. It thrives in the darkness of our ignorance. When we don't know it's happening, it flourishes.
We are your daughters, we are your sisters, we are your mothers, we are your friends, your family. But absolutely you should be concerned, because it is happening, and it's not this dirty little secret. It's happening right in front of our faces. And the survivors, you can tell, we're screaming for help at every opportunity, even though we're not saying the words.
I think sometimes we create a false narrative of that commercial sex is all voluntary and there's no victims, that it's a victimless crime. If there is somebody purchasing commercial sex, there's almost always a victim on that other end. For many survivors of sex trafficking, the life expectancy is not very high, and oftentimes many try to take their own life. This is the horror that they are living and the violence that they experience, that not being alive oftentimes feels like the better choice than being sold over and over multiple times a day and experiencing abuse at the hands of their trafficker and often abuse at the hands of their sex buyers.